Dog here. You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Happy Q&A Friday, folks. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair, Mr. Michael Liebowitz, who is also helming this amazing channel, otherwise known as the Rational Alternative. Michael, what's going on in this channel? Tell me what's going on.
How do you get your green screen to do that cool thing like that?
Green screen?
Oh, okay. Never mind. Never mind.
I'm just covering the seam with my body.
Okay, I see. All right. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We've got a great show tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, with Megan Ribbons on the Rational Alternative Weekend discussing Aristotle and his biology. Megan evidently has sent me some materials to do experiments. So we'll see how that goes.
Materials to do experiments? What does that mean?
I don't know. We're going to find out.
Dishes...
Perhaps. We're going to find out. We're going to see what's what. We're going to get it. But yeah, look, subscribe to the channel. We've got great content. I've got a show on here where I do interviews and debates. We've got this show every weekday. We've got stuff on the weekends. We've got membership-only content. And if you fact-check us, you're going to see that we give you the real dirt on what's going on in this world. Now, I just give you a heads up. I do when we get to J.D. Vance, because I didn't get a chance to send it to you because I listened to it too late, was Marco Rubio's speech. So I'll be doing some commenting on that as well.
My God.
Please like, share, subscribe, and do not forget, we absolutely love these super chats and super stickers. And it's Open Question Friday, so bring your questions as well.
And I think we're streaming on Twitch, and right?
We're streaming on Twitch. The Michael Liebowitz Show is also available on Spotify. These shows haven't been being posted to Spotify because, quite frankly, it's too much.
Michael, you know, one of the reasons I love dogs is because they're so resilient and so optimistic. You know, this dog, Ziggy, my wife's puppy, just had surgery a couple of days ago. You know, he had to have his little testicles removed, but they were inside his body. They hadn't dropped yet, so they had to do a major surgery on him to remove them, like they have to do with female dogs. And you'd think, you know, this guy's after such a surgery, you'd have a week, 2 weeks of recovery. This guy's running around, jumping around, doing crazy things already, just 48 hours after his surgery. It's like it's never even happened. I think we could learn something from these guys. Anyway, Mike, we've got a lot to talk about.
Wait a second. What do you mean?
We can learn something from the optimism of the dogs. Dogs are.
You're going to learn something? Hey, this is today's lesson. If you too could have your balls removed.
Dogs are always saying yes to life. You know, injuries are inconsequential to them.
Yes, even if your balls are removed, you too can run around.
Always say hi.
Let's get to the news.
Always say hello. Always be optimistic and happy. This is what they are. This is what makes them amazing creatures.
This is stressing me out. Okay.
Yes, Akira, I am bringing up the castration again. I know I have issues with it.
Okay, can we?
Let's go on to the news today.
That's what I was kind of hoping for.
Since it's Q&A Friday, are you guys planning on seeing the Odyssey? Absolutely, I am. I am absolutely planning on seeing the Odyssey. You, Michael?
I'm definitely considering it. There's no doubt about that. I don't know that I'm going to, but I'm certainly...
There's rumors that Christopher Nolan went a little bit woke with it. And from what one of the lead actresses has said, Yale graduate who had never read the Odyssey before, by the way, a master's in theater arts who had never read the Odyssey before. Troubling. She said it was a very misogynistic work. Absolutely not true. We could talk about that at some other point. But Michael, why don't you start it? Lead us off, man.
You're leading. What do you mean?
I'm confused. I don't want to have this conversation again.
We don't have to. If you I put them in the order, just lead the way.
That's what you always say, and then you don't.
Okay, look, folks. First things first. Trump's ridiculous speech from last night. First of all, let's discuss style. This guy, as he does this thing where he kind of slumps his shoulders while he's talking, he's got this kind of slur to what he's saying. He comes off as somebody not well. That's the first thing. Okay. Secondly, this obsession that he has with a stolen election from 6 years ago. I wish people would understand, and I don't mean necessarily people in this audience, but the people that support him. All of this is the only thing that drives this is his insecurities. The most powerful man in the world is questioning the electional integrity, election integrity of our country because he's an insecure twit. That's the bottom line. He cannot handle losing. So whenever he loses, he fabricates excuses. I've covered this so many times. I hesitate to say it again, but I will. He loses the Emmys. It's because they're rigged. He loses court cases. It's because they're rigged. He loses Iowa. It's because it's rigged. He loses Colorado. It's because it's rigged. He loses the popular vote. It's because it's rigged. He loses the election. It's because it's rigged. He's an insecure human being who cannot stand losing, and that's what this is all about. So he claims that
Michael,
he's going to
is this psychologizing? Are you psychologizing?
No,
right
we're not going to go through that again. Please. I don't want us to go over what psychologizing is again. We've been over this before. All you have to do is go look it up. I am not excusing or judging him based on his subconscious psychological problems. I'm judging him based on his overt behavior, which indicates an inability to handle losing. And I'm not saying that we should judge him morally based on his subconscious drives. No. But we've talked about that before, and the fact that you would bring it up again is a little disturbing.
Just keeping you true, man. Just keeping you 100.
You're not. You're just interrupting.
Just keeping it 100.
Point. So anyways, he claimed that he was going to expose all kinds of things. So one of the claims he makes is that China is, they're trying to influence our elections, which wouldn't surprise me anyway, but specifically because they're afraid of him. And he says they've gotten a hold of our voter rolls. A couple minutes looking into this will tell you that most of the stuff on the voter rolls are available to the public if you want it anyways. This isn't some great grab on the part of the Chinese. So that's the first thing. Secondly, let's just take a look. I found this, I wanted to read all these files, but part of it, I think, is predicated on the idea that people aren't going to go through and read this because there's, I guess, hundreds of pages. Now, I was able to go through some of them. Like this nugget, for instance, I found awesome. This says, and I understand it's small, but it says, as the 2020 election approaches, the IC has detected Chinese state-sponsored cyber actors targeting the former vice president's presidential campaign, probably to gather intelligence that could enable future operations. The first instance this election cycle that we have seen them directly targeting a U.S. presidential campaign. China has also conducted cyber espionage against other election-related entities. The IC assesses that China does not currently intend to covertly interfere to try to sway the outcome of the election, although this actually could enable some operations if they chose to. So first of all, it says that China was looking into screwing with Biden, not Trump. Doesn't mean there's nothing in them about Trump, just they were also going after Biden. Also says they hadn't decided to interfere in the elections. From my own look at these and from the fact checks that I was able to do, reading various articles from Fox, National Review, Newsmax, and others, and also going to fact checkers and, of course, the artificial intelligence, he presented no evidence that they impacted the election or that voting was turned. Even John Solomon, his lackey, although he's posting like a madman on X about how the media is dishonest and all that stuff, nevertheless said he hadn't seen anything that showed any votes were changed. This is just more bullshit coming from the head of our government who is trying to make excuses for election losses. This is really disgusting. It really is. And it's not only disgusting that he does it, it's disgusting that people excuse it. There was also this, by the way. No, this isn't it. This is it. This was released earlier this month, July 3rd, 2026. President Putin and senior Russian officials are overseeing efforts by proxies to spread claims about former Vice President Biden, as well as Ukrainian politicians and alleged Ukrainian influence in the 2016 U.S. election. These claims include that when the former vice president was in office, he engaged in criminal activity in his dealings with Ukraine and individuals tied to Ukrainian energy firm Burisma. Some guy whose name I can't read, and other proxy actors affiliated with the Russian government are advancing such narratives with U.S. officials and other prominent persons, as well as online, including through personal interaction, audio and documentary film releases via U.S. and Ukrainian media outlets. These figures are conspiring to intensify their efforts as the election approaches to orchestrate a high-profile scandal implicating former Vice President Biden and the Democratic Party, yada, yada, yada.
Michael, can I say something?
Well, hold on. No, you can't. I just want to say. So there are two pieces of evidence that have been released that foreign actors were interfering against Biden. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one thing to say about that, the release, Michael. Don't.
Well,
that's exactly what that is. That's a face plant, Michael. When you release evidence that you think is going to decisively prove your narrative, and it actually proves that the bad actors, if they were acting at all, were interested in acting in your favor.
Now let me just say, a big problem I have with these dumps is that none of us are intelligence experts, right? Some of this stuff says this is for information only.
Sure.
This hasn't been evaluated yet. Some of it's been assessed with low to moderate degrees of confidence. There's all types of things, and we don't have the context for this stuff that the intelligence experts do. So it makes it, a bit difficult to assess. But Trump also suggested, and I didn't see this, but again, I didn't read the whole files, that they were paying off media in America to impact the election against Trump. And then there's also Trump saying that because the media who are operating on our beautiful free whatever, I forget what they're called now, communication lines or whatever. I can't remember the name of them now. I'm drawing a blank. But he says that because they're using
better you than me.
That they're using our waves, our airwaves. That's what they are. And they're doing it for free. He's now again calling for the revocation of licenses, yada, yada, yada. So whatever. It's gross. It's disgusting. And yet people buy it. And what I mean by that is, it's the gullibility of the MAGA crowd. So in my, some of my hometown area, one of them posted this. Let me just put this up. Add to stage. He says, Jesus Christ, this is what your speech is about. Could have used the time to uplift the nation. That's feeling the pain. But no, let's talk about this. So then this guy comes in and says, uplift trying to assassinate the U.S. president when half the country is against this country getting better as long as it means Trump goes down. He just pointed out straight corruption among our government, past presidents and other nations. And you guys want to believe nothing ever happened. This speech was long overdue. And hopefully now people go to jail and the truth will finally come to light. The hypocrisy is insane, but will never be admitted. Sad. So this guy frequently goes on to various people, local guys, Facebook sites and spreads this shit. So today I kind of got annoyed with it. So I told him, hey, buddy, are you interested in debating me on these issues? I'd be happy to do it. And he said, yeah. And I said, look, we could debate whether the election was stolen. We could debate the idea of tariffs, whatever you want. He says, sure, but you have to watch 2,000 Mules. I said, yeah, okay. I'll watch this long debunked film.
That's the Dinesh D'Souza film?
Right. So as I try to find this so that I can watch it, it pops up and it says it's not as easy as it used to be because the publisher or the producer, publisher, whatever, has rescinded it and apologized for it because they'd been sued for defamation. But this guy still says it's great. So I said, why don't we do this? I said, we could debate the issue. I said, and we'll make this small wager, and this will be the wager. I said, what we'll do is when it's over, we'll get the transcript and we'll have an independent party, friends of ours, submit it to 3 separate AIs to judge who won. I said, whoever gets 2 out of 3 wins. I said, the loser can never again on social media discuss Donald Trump. I said, you up for that? He says, I wouldn't let anybody take away my free speech, which right away demonstrates that the guy doesn't understand what free speech is, because voluntarily not going on an app is not the same as having your free speech taken away. But, the bottom line is, I don't know. You could just ignore these guys, but what he does to people, it looks like it's bordering on harassment. Anything somebody posts about, he comes in with this Trump conspiracy crap that's easily debunkable. Like one of the claims he made was they claimed that the stock market was going to crash because of tariffs and look how well it's doing. And I said, well, I don't know a reputable economist that said that. I said, but what economists did say is that the importing country pays the tariff, not the exporting country. They don't pay the tariffs. What they've said is that they are going to alter the structure of production because it's going to raise the price of inputs and also raise, other prices of various goods. I said, they've also said that the balance of payments is an outdated concept because we're no longer on the gold standard. And they've also said that Trump's position is based on mercantilist fallacies. I said, now, if you want to debate any of that, sure, let's do it. And I'm going to go through with this because that's the way. I don't know how else. But the problem is when you debate these guys and any conspiracy theorist, any information you bring, you believe that? Well, if you're going to believe that. But the same people have no problem believing a guy who's, according to multi-fact checkers, lied more than any other president in history, who I can catch lying just based on his contradictions, who's on tape saying he's for the Iraq war, then he's never for the Iraq war. I mean, it goes on and on and on with this guy. Believe him, nobody else. Effing ridiculous. Now you go ahead.
What? Well, Mike, you stole my thunder. But we do have a comment from I Like Numbers. Would Michael not talk about Trump on social media if the decision went the other way? I don't think the decision would go the other way, but I would wager that, Michael, if you made that bet, you'd keep it. You'd keep your word.
Of course I would.
And it might be somewhat of a psychological relief to you not to have to talk about Trump, to be honest with you, because it is maddening. It
absolutely is.
It is psychologically damaging to expose ourselves to this guy's malignant narcissism day after day after day after day.
Right. And of course, if I made the bet, I would honor it.
So there's a couple more questions here, Michael. If you spend 5 seconds on this research, you've done more than anyone in Trump's target audience. I have to say, I know a bunch of real MAGA people, and they do not do their research. So that's probably very true. Also, with respect to the Odyssey, I would bet money most of the people upset at Christopher Nolan have never even read the Odyssey. Most of the conversations I've heard, though, Captain Chandler, come from Victor David Hanson, who is a classicist who has read the Odyssey multiple times, taught it in university for decades and decades. So that's not entirely true, but you're probably right. Many of the people who are just up in arms about...
Well, he said most of the people, Mark, not one guy.
I know, but what I'm saying is there's the criticism that I have heard is coming from Victor Davis Hanson, not from the woke right community, countering the woke left. So this is an interesting question. What do you think of this? Thanks for the $5 Canadian, Rock the Rock. Read it out loud, man.
I think he means how do you go about deterring Christians from the idea that capitalism and religion are compatible without offending them? I have no idea.
They're okay. I see. Yeah.
I really don't know. I just, I generally communicate respectfully, and I don't try to cater to people's insecurities, misconceptions, or unwillingness to reason. I mean, if you can't have the conversation, a friend of mine the other day, for instance, said to me, you guys are on that show and you guys talk about mysticism and this, that. Why not just respect other people's beliefs? And I said, well, those same people have no problem talking about how I'm going to burn in hell for eternity. I mean, come on. It's like that whole respect their beliefs is just BS. It's garbage. You know what I mean? They want to have the right. And when I get to Marco Rubio, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but to go around to preach their beliefs, to try to influence the government and, to implement their various positions. And I'm supposed to cater to that and be nice and never criticize religion. No, thank you.
Yeah. So I would say, Rock, I mean, there are some aspects of the Protestant religion that are compatible with capitalism. And of course, that's what's created this presumptive marriage between the two, because some Protestant sects believed in working hard and diligence and saving and some of the virtues that coincide with capitalism. And I don't know if you would be offending a Christian to say, well, capitalism relies on rational action. It relies on reason as its primary means of ascertaining everything in the world. And religion is a faith-based system that has a completely different orientation towards reality. And that's incompatible with reason. I don't know if they'd be offended if you said stuff like that, or that capitalism is about satisfying your wants and needs and pursuing your own values as opposed to the communal life and the sacrifice of your own values for the community. That's incompatible. That's a Christian ethic that's incompatible with capitalism. I don't know if you'd offend people by saying stuff like that, Rob. Well, but I like that he's trying to find ways into these communities to try to sway them, right? Offense isn't going to sway them.
But I'll say this, like, we're just talking about gullible MAGA, right? So should we do our best to not offend them because of their beliefs? And if we're talking about radical Islam, should we do our best to not offend them? And what about leftists, socialists, communists? Do I have to go about not trying to offend them as well? And I just think that if you're talking the truth and you're having an honest discussion or debate, that's enough. I don't know. I like Numbers wants to know, you brought that up. Of course I could go without talking about Trump. I just wish he would just call himself Scott, because we know that's who it is.
Scott, come out.
The thing is we talk about Trump because Trump is the president of the United States. And he's obviously out of his tree. And if people don't recognize that, I mean, look, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. I mean, there's this idea, and we're going to, when we get to Vance, that, well, the left is just so bad that we have to support Republicans because Republicans were once on the right, even though really now they're not. Republicans once favored at least a watered down capitalism, even though now they don't. Republicans were once originalists on the Constitution. They aren't anymore, but they once at least gave lip service to that. So we should pretend like they are the good guys. No, fuck that. They're not the good guys.
I agree with you, Michael. And of course, we are encouraged by some of the folks within our own group to try to build coalitions with people. It's a very difficult thing when you're principled to build coalitions with people who don't hold your basic principles and to ally yourself with them as a matter of convenience because they're advancing a certain narrow part of your agenda. This is one of the things that we're having to deal with now as a political party, and how to do that, how to build a party while maintaining principles. It's going to be a difficult haul, folks, but that's what we plan on doing.
Okay, let me offend everybody. Rock says for $5, thank you very much, Rock. He says, what I find difficult is the Bible can be interpreted so many different ways and contradicts itself. It says good things, then refutes them. I don't know. I grant it's subject to a lot of different interpretations. But let's look at things that really aren't subject to interpretation. It talks about the world being created, the universe really being created in 6 days. It talks about there being light before day and night before there's a sun, which we know is not possible. It has talking serpents, which we know don't exist. So, I mean, there's an abundance of things that, you go in there,
Donkeys talk as well.
yeah, Noah's flood. Uh, I mean, there's so many things. The guy living in the giant fish for 3 days, Jonah. There's so many things in there that are just
That's
not
possible.
believable. No, it's not possible.
That's
So
possible.
there's so many things that are not believable. That's the first thing. Secondly, at least in the New Testament, it wants you to accept things on faith. No, I won't do that. Sorry, won't do that. Won't accept things on faith. I'm from Missouri, not literally, but figuratively, show me. I'm not accepting on faith. So that's two bad things right off the bat. And then there's an abundance of passages, of course, about killing people, killing homosexuals, killing people for not working, for working on the Sabbath. And there's an abundance of other things they'll kill you for that I just can't remember right now off the top of my head. And never mind the idea that you're going to burn in a pit of fire for all eternity for not what you do, but because of what you believe. These are not good messages.
Indeed. Can I just say what a stud James Valiant is? When he was young, partying sometimes involved recitations of Homer in the Greek. Only those who love it like that should touch it. Wow. That's intense, James. I mean, I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, but in English, my friend. There's no way I could read it in classical Greek. I admire you for that. Hey, stop.
I got to go back here because I'm trying to figure out what people are saying. And because it moves down. Bonnie said something. Airwaves. Yes, Bonnie. Thank you. Bonnie also said something else down here. I want to find. Where is it? Bonnie said, don't talk about religion at all. That's no win. Talk about what they can observe about man's nature and go from there because that's what capitalism is based on. Yes, Bonnie, that's true. It is what capitalism, well, it's what it should be based on, of course. Gary Menard says Pinocchio lived inside a fish. Why couldn't Jonah? James Valiant showing off his knowledge. He says 2,000 years ago, Philo knew allegory was its only hope. Let me show off mine a little bit as well, as did Rashi. Rashi said that anybody who thinks it's to be taken literally is very, very silly. Okay, let's get this off the screen. Did you listen at least? So last night, Jim Valiant sent me the Joe Rogan, what's his face now, J.D. Vance interview, and told me to listen, and I did. And then I, of course, sent it to you, Mark, to listen. Did you listen?
I did, and it frightened me, Michael. It frightened me. It frightened me even more than Trump's address to the nation, believe it or not.
We need to tell Peter that Megan loves him. For $2, I'd be happy to. I would have done it for free.
Peter, Megan loves you.
And we do too for the $2. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, this was frightening because basically, you tell me if I'm getting this wrong.
You're not.
He basically, well, thank you. He said, when you have conditions of inequality like we have, and he particularly named the industrial age, commonly known as the Gilded Age, as an age of great inequality, that age of progress and that age of wealth influx into the United States of America, where wealth was growing exponentially, not just for one class of people, but for pretty much everybody. But he said the inequality led to communism, led to fascism, led to these statist ideas, and that when you have wealth inequality, hold on a second, you get fascism and communism, and that somehow we have to incorporate the idea of workers having a say in the businesses if we want to, I guess, avoid the overall result of turning communist or socialist. So in other words, Michael, we have to become socialists to avoid socialism.
Yeah, I don't know how better to say it, but I'm going to give it a shot, at least to elaborate. Yeah, the idea is that the Industrial Revolution ultimately wasn't a good thing. He actually refers to robber barons, which I don't know how somebody that claims to be pro-capitalist would ever use such a term. But nevertheless, well, he's not pro-capitalist, and he doesn't even claim to be at this point. He's a post-liberal with Deneen and the other guys. So yeah, his argument is that when you have that type of wealth concentration, and he acts as if it just stays in one place and doesn't spread anywhere, it doesn't get to the the other people, the other people in society. Hold on. Let me hit that. Yeah. And, so this is going to lead. We know from experience, capitalism leads to communism and fascism. So we don't want that to happen. So we need to. He says he doesn't really know the solution, but it has to involve workers having a say in what happens. Basically, he's endorsing unions coming back. He thinks unions are a good idea. Not that he doesn't say there's never been any abuses.
Michael, he's endorsing the Democratic Socialist Party, the Democratic Socialists
right,
of America,
which is so bizarre to me. It's just bizarre that this guy is on a ticket. Now, I want you to go back. Let's think about Trump. I'm the tariff man. We need to take back media licenses because they're saying things about me that I don't like. There's currently price gouging going on. We need to stop the price gouging. Trump, who also favors eminent domain, not only in the constitutional variety, but the variety where they take people's property and give it to private developers. These people are not in any way, shape, or form pro-capitalist. So let me just say, so I am supposed to buy that Zoran Mamdani and his crew are such a threat that I need to accept basically worker cooperatives. I need to accept the fact that capitalism leads to bad results. I'm to accept that companies are engaging in price gouging and the government needs to do something about it. I'm supposed to accept that taking people's property from them is okay. And Trump threatening businesses to do his bidding is okay. That the government buying stakes in private property and private companies, that's cool. Tariffs, throw that into the bargain. Those are awesome. All this I'm supposed to accept, along with the exploding national debt that nothing is being done about. So yes, we're going to embrace all this so that we can stop the other guy from doing it.
Yeah, I guess he thought he was co-opting the enemy's position and making his position stronger, but he's actually ceding the moral high ground to the other side and giving them more ammunition, Michael. It's sort of true that the capitalism that they think is capitalism is is a highly regulated economy where the state and the economics are merged together, and the state is acting in the interests of what it considers to be the economic interests of everyone. And of course, that creates great dislocations. It creates booms and busts and bubbles and price dislocations. It causes supply chain problems. And because this creates, shortages and issues with accessibility, people start chafing at this, and they consider the current system, which is the government working to plan economics and for its own social purposes, as a capitalist system. And so they yearn for something different. And this is what they come up with. The solution is, well, we don't want the elites running things. We'll just give it to the people. But folks, we don't live in a capitalist society. We live in a mixed economy where the political class can, in fact, determine who winners and losers are. The real democracy, I'll use that term loosely, is the marketplace, folks, where your dollar decides whether or not a business can move forward, whether it can prosper or not, whether it can make resources accessible or not. They are servants to you. In the mixed economy, they are servants to the political class. In a market, they are servants to you. James says we're screwed, but James, are we? I don't think we are, because there is a party out there that does offer an alternative. It's the American Capitalist Party. Go to americancapitalistparty.org. Check out the policies. Check out the platform. See if you agree. If you do, become a member. And we're also having a national convention in Pittsburgh on September 19th and 20th. Show up. Show up. As Nico Sotirakopoulos said, we have to feel a sense of urgency with respect to the two sides of the political spectrum that are closing in on us. If we want to avoid the calamities of the future, let's start seizing liberty right now.
So let me just read something here from Dr. Leonard Peikoff in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. There is nothing more to be said here about the liberals. No one can confuse Franklin D. Roosevelt or Edward M. Kennedy with objectivism. About the conservatives, however, who pretend to be defenders of free enterprise or the American way of life while spreading all the opposite ideas and laws, something remains to be said. Precisely because of their pretense, the conservatives are morally lower than the liberals. They are farther removed from reality, and therefore they are more harmful in practice. Since they purport to be fighting big government, they are the main source of political confusion in the public mind. They give people the illusion of an electoral alternative without the fact. Thus, the statist drift proceeds unchecked and unchallenged. And I have to say, that seems to me more applicable now than it was then.
Absolutely. The Rock, principal distinction between socialism versus Christianity. James Valiant says something very interesting with respect to that. Christianity is a personal morality, not a specific agenda demanded of the state. Socialists often reject supernatural. That's the difference. I would even say, James, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus himself made an explicit distinction between religion and the state by saying, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. He, in the interest, I think, of derailing the zealots at the time and distancing himself from the rebels who were trying to throw off the Roman yoke, really said, our religion is different. The government is different. And so I would go with James's concept that even Jesus made the claim that religion is a personal relationship to God, and it doesn't really offer a political perspective, although it can be taken that way as politics are downstream from ethics. So it'll happen that it'll infect someone's politics at some point or another. Yeah, and both are anti-wealth, collectivist, altruistic on steroids. I agree with you, James, as usual. All right, Michael, have we talked enough about the statists who are now trying to command the heights of Washington?
Well, no, because I want to discuss a little bit of Marco Rubio's speech. And
I didn't see that. So let me hear
you
it.
didn't, because I wasn't aware that I was going to watch it. But then as I was scrolling through Facebook this morning, I saw avowed objectivists talking about how wonderful the speech was. It was so great. It was awesome. And I saw this, from other people as well. First of all, let me just say, the idea that we're going to judge somebody by a speech they give is silly to me. Marco Rubio has demonstrated what he is. By taking a job in the Trump administration, by siding with Trump, by defending Trump.
And not resigning.
Right, and not resigning after the things that he'd previously said about Trump, and nothing about Trump changed. So, I mean, I know who he is, and I really don't care if the speech was magnificent. Okay, that said, he gets into this, he gives the speech, and it's essentially about the threat of left-wing violence and left-wing terrorism and how bad it is. And he largely focused on Europe. So I don't know the truth or the veracity of the claims he was making. When it came to American left-wing violence, he was talking about stuff from the 70s. That the Weatherman Underground, the Sudanese liberation movement, that sort of things, and he talked about these assassination attempts. But I don't think of the guy that tried to kill Trump as some left wing movement. I think of him as a mentally ill guy, and that was kooky. I mean, I think he was a registered Republican. I'm not really sure, but I don't think of that as left wing. He also said that, we treat left-wing violence as if it's somehow justified. The media does that. I don't really see that. The only example that he gave was the George Floyd riots, when they were saying, these are mostly peaceful riots. And I'll give him that one. But that one example doesn't really make it an epidemic of excusing left-wing violence. There's also studies out there that show that right-wing violence is actually more prominent. I noticed that he was completely silent about the riot on January 6th at the United States Capitol that attempted to overthrow an election and talked about hanging the vice president because he wouldn't do their bidding. So there was that. and he mixes in with, I think that there's some guys, they just hear left wing and they're like, yeah, go after the left, the left, the left. So Marco went on and he talked about something, he gave some lines that I would tend to agree with. And he says, the socialists are people that hate producers because these people don't produce anything. The socialists don't produce anything, and so they hate people that do. And I think there's some truth to that. And I think and he talked about how the West is good, and I thought that was a pretty good thing. But then he said, the communists, they don't want us to believe in miracles. I don't want to believe in miracles either. And then he says the communists want a world without God. Yeah, so do I. But it gets back to the whole thing is you're conflating things or merging things together that don't belong, like capitalism and religion, capitalism and Christianity. The idea that there would be people who tout objectivism saying that this was somehow marvelous, once you throw God into the mix as part of the greatness, you're obliterating your case, in my view. And to defend that, not real good.
I agree, Michael. I think that the fact that the Republicans have taken on this religious mantle since the late 60s, and particularly after Reagan's administration, and used Christianity as a litmus test for the viability of any Republican candidate going forward, has seriously hobbled them. I'll give you one example, Michael. I'll give you one example, Michael. Dennis Prager. I used to listen to Dennis Prager quite a bit. He's a conservative talk show host. He's syndicated, but he's out here in California. He's a conservative Jew, very, very religious. And over time, Michael, I watched his religiosity overtake his sense of reason. There was a time when he was quite rational across the board with respect to most topics on politics, but religion slowly began to overtake that rationality to the point where he pinned all of the woke movement and the problematic rise of socialism on the individualistic ethics of the Enlightenment and on reason and the separation of us from God. And so in essence, rejected the Enlightenment, especially the American Enlightenment. And that's when you embrace even a scintilla of that mysticism and that irrationality, it's going to affect the whole, Michael, because everything's interconnected. So eventually it just infects everything and metastasizes across all of your ideas. So yeah, you should reject it. You should reject it.
I have a great quote here from Barry Goldwater. Mark my word, if and when these preachers get control of the party, obviously the Republican Party, and they're sure trying to do so, it's going to be a terrible damn problem. Frankly, these people frighten me. Politics and governing demand compromise, but these Christians believe they are acting in the name of God, so they can't and won't compromise. I know, I've tried to deal with them. I don't know about the whole compromise thing because I don't know the specific context of what he's talking about, but I certainly think he was on to something with warning about the religious folk taking over the party. I want to put this up real quick before we get to Rock's question.
Oh, good.
Hold on.
Thank you, Tammy.
Tammy Gidman is now a YouTube member. Thank you so much, Tammy. Welcome.
Rock
wants to know, was Jesus a good man, but religion mixed with power becomes bad? From what I've seen of him, I wouldn't say he's a good man. I mean, I don't know if that's, true. I only have the gospel accounts, but somebody who's preaching sacrifice, telling people to turn their backs on their values and follow him, I don't think that's good.
I don't think he said anything different from the typical Judaism of the day. So in that time, I think he was more or less in sync with the ethics of the day, which I don't consider stellar at all. And certainly religion mixed with power is a very dangerous mix. And it's been the mix that human beings have been subjected to for thousands of years, which is why we have the separation of church and state here in the United States.
We do. Let's see.
I love this philosophy at work. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, but you got to get You got to get the top one first because he gave us €5. Thank you, Philosophy at Work. How come women can go sleeveless to special occasions while I have to wear a suit and tie?
I
Even the
wanted to let it. So
Constitution
that's
says,
more important than saying I love you.
even the Constitution says men have the right to bear arms. I love that Philosophy at Work. But of course, women's arms are much prettier than men's.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I think that your love for your wife is more important than the arm. So I'm going to go with this. It's €2. Marabins, I love you too, from Philosophy at Work. So now I know who Philosophy at Work is, which I previously didn't. Philosophy at Work, from what I understand, you were an Aristotelian. Perhaps I could get you to agree to come on the show sometime and talk about Aristotle. If I'm wrong about you being an Aristotelian, just let me know. But yes, let me. Now can I answer the question? €5. How come women can go sleeveless to special occasions while I have to wear a suit and tie? Even the Constitution says men have a right to bear arms. I would suggest pulling a Pellegrino and just not dressing like that. Just dress however you want.
Is that what I do?
Oh my God, yeah, and it's fine. I love it.
What do you mean? Oh, like when I went on KTLA 5 and I didn't wear a jacket or a tie, I just had my fucking t-shirt.
Yeah.
That was bad.
I'll never forget the first time. By the way, I just got the Facebook thing today. The first time you met Diana when she and I drove to New York.
And I had no shoes on?
Right. And she's a nervous wreck, wants to make sure, I'm going to meet this actor. I better put this on. I got to get my good shoes and this and that. We get there and Mark's in the lobby like a hippie at this fancy hotel, kicked back with a t-shirt, no shoes, and his dog. That's fine with me, man. I'm not going to blame you.
I have to admit, when I did my morning show though on KTLA, I debated dressing up. I debated at least wearing a jacket. I tossed it out because I'd never watched the show, and then immediately regretted it. So I did feel a little self-conscious that I wasn't in the loop wardrobe-wise. And I do try to dress up for certain things, like red carpets and stuff like that. I try to show respect for the occasion. Like if it's a premiere for a film, especially if it's my friends' premieres, I go and I dress up for stuff like that because I'm respecting my butts.
I'm telling you, Megan Ribbons demonstrates her brilliance once again.
No.
Mike, you are never wrong. Megan, what a brilliant woman.
Everybody
should know. Megan is a PhD. She's a PhD. Brilliant woman.
Ian Gilmore says modern people dress like hobos. What? Now, Michael, I feel like you put me in a category here now that people are going to get the wrong idea.
Who's this? From Twitch. You both big fans of Ayn Rand. Yes, sir.
Yes, Maximus. Yes, we are.
Maximus. Speaking of hobos, when I was in the can, the big house, there was this Akira Felix, Mark and James being right and me being wrong. It's such a rarity. It's such a rarity. Oh my God.
Majority of the time.
Such a rarity. So anyways,
Michael, you can't grow until you learn to introspect and discover when, in fact, you are wrong, which is, I would say, a good 50% of the time.
You don't believe that. I'd love to strap you to a lie detector test on that one.
I could fool the lie detector test.
Oh my God.
All I have to do is believe what I'm saying.
Okay, Costanza. Can I tell my story that I wanted to tell now that it's outdated? I was referencing Ian Gilmore's talking about Americans dressing like hobos. So some 25 years ago, I'm in the big house and there's this kid and he's a young black kid, loved to play basketball, and he's dressed very sloppily. So he comes over. I said, "My man, you look like a hobo." He looks dead at me and says, "Yo, man, I don't play that."
Well, Mike,
I laughed so hard.
What do you think about that? For example, what do you think about dressing down? If you're rich, you could be dressed in Armani all the time, but you choose to just dress in jeans and a t-shirt and simple shoes.
Look, I think that there's something to be said. I don't want to completely poo-poo the idea of dressing to impress and dressing for your career, because people do judge by the way you're dressing. There's no doubt about that. At the same time, I think that I'm more concerned with what Robert says, my own comfort and what I like to wear. And if, somebody doesn't like it, okay. And if somebody doesn't want to watch the show because I'm not wearing a suit, I'm fine with that too. I mean, the thing is this, when it comes to stuff like that, let me just give you a quick example about with writing. I've written papers and had one person tell me, dude, you're way too much into the weeds. Your average person doesn't understand that. It's way too intellectual. Somebody else reads the same paper and tells me I'm dumbing it down too much. And my point is that different people like different things. So the other day I posted a reel and somebody says, those captions are terrible. I won't be looking at your reels anymore. Now, if the person would have said, I don't like your reels or I don't like the captions, all right. You don't like them. That's fine. But there's a difference between that and saying they're bad. And I think some people like the idea of a show like this where we mix honesty and deep research and intellectual conversation with joking and being laid back. There's other people who say, oh my God, that's so terrible. You guys, you need to be more serious. You're never going to please everyone, so you might as well be comfortable. That's the gist of what I'm trying to say.
It's like the garden party. You know that song? Went to a garden party to reminisce with my old friends. You know that one?
No.
Well, I'm all right now. I learned my lesson well. You see, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself, right?
That's true.
Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom. Michael, do we have any more news to go over on this illustrious Friday?
Jim comes in with Ricky Nelson. If you would like to say something about Iran, I really don't care. I don't want to talk about it.
No, what's new about Iran? So we're now bombing bridges in the interior. We're now trying to take out some of their infrastructure, something that should have been done a long time ago to make the Iranians more uncomfortable.
I didn't think they'd actually do that. I read it this morning and I was a bit surprised, but I also think it's a bit half-assed. I don't really think that it's doing. I think there's a big difference between telling somebody you're going to destroy their infrastructure
and hitting 4 bridges. Or whatever it is they're hitting.
Yeah, there's a big difference there.
I mean, what they could do is take out the rail that goes from China to Iran, where a lot of weapons come through that route. They're not doing that. They're not taking out any of the ports on the Caspian Sea, which a lot of exchanges with the Russians come through there. They're not doing that. So, they're still doing it in such a way as to not create an incredible amount of difficulty for the IRGC and the people of Iran. So, Michael, I don't know what this is going to bring us.
Okay, so Maximus, before Mark gives his thought of the day and before I read the question, Maximus 99 says, I'm confused. Isn't she super pro egoism? So how can she believe in morality? Egoism is actually an ethical theory, Maximus, defined here by AI. Ethical egoism is a normative theory asserting that individuals ought to act in their own self-interest. It argues that promoting one's own well-being is the morally correct way to behave. So egoism is not contrary to morality. Egoism is morality. Now I got to find the question. You weren't here yesterday. You sold me right out. Do you remember that?
I don't. I'm sorry. My dog is crying for his mama, so you might have to talk.
Okay, I'll talk, but that doesn't justify selling me out yesterday.
I don't have to justify selling you out, Michael.
Oh, I know what I know what I asked yesterday. I asked if soccer was boring because I think it's boring, and I'm quite frankly sick of it and can't wait till it's over. Do you think Ian Gilmore says absolutely too much positional playing where very little happens? For me, hockey is the sweet spot. Akira Felix says he doesn't think it's boring, but he refuses to support the corruption of FIFA. And Zardo says, yes, soccer is boring. Can you give the capitalist thought of the day, or are you all wound up?
As you hear, my dog is going nuts, so I think you're going to have to do it, my friend.
Oh my God. Okay.
Listen.
All right. Hit pause. Hit. I'll mute you. This is silly. You don't know how to control your dog. You don't know how to do it. It's getting out of hand. So anyways, capitalist thought of the day is this. The things being touted by the likes of J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and even Marco Rubio are not capitalism. Capitalism is not the system of God. It is not the system that ultimately leads to fascism and communism. And it certainly is not the system where the president blames people for price gouging and threatens them that they'd better lower their prices. Capitalism is the system of freedom, freedom of production, freedom of exchange, and property rights. That is ultimately what it boils down to, is capitalism is the protection of individual rights, not what the Republicans are for. All right, are you ready, Mark, or is the dog still barking?
Ian says Mark now has a soundboard to give dog sounds when I don't want to talk. But the fact of the matter is, Ziggy doesn't listen to me. He listens to his mom, and he's across the room, and there's really nothing I can do to shut him up. We have somebody that... We had a little pipe burst downstairs, so we have a plumber coming in and working on it, and that's probably what he's barking at right now.
All right, I guess I'll ask the question.
You're gonna have to.
I do everything else. Why not do this?
Let me ask. I'll ask a question then, real quickly. Do you think I have a soundboard that's producing the dog howling noises, or not? Or is it my actual wife's dog caterwauling in the background? Or do you think I'm trying not to talk and give the capitalist thought for the day? I love giving the capitalist thought for the day.
Here's the question. Here's the question. Folks, and you better go to YouTube and answer this question, please, at the Rational Alternative channel on YouTube. Remember, if you like what you have here, that's our channel's name, The Rational Alternative. This show is The Capitalist Corner. Here's the question for you. Does Mark Pellegrino pull his weight on this show? Does Mark Pellegrino pull his weight on this show? Go to YouTube and answer.
Come on. That sucks.
All right, Mark, take us out.
In case you didn't know, Sebastian, come on. Hey, thank you, Katie. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of a split on this. For those of you who don't know, I am an actor. I have another profession.
Oh, my God.
I am pursuing another profession that puts bread and onions on the table, and that's what I have to do in addition to this. So I do the best I can. Look, guys, you have a whole weekend to check your premises.
And by the way, folks, I have nothing else to do. All I do over here is I play with my feet and sing songs during the day. I don't have a job. I don't have to pay rent or anything like that, or bills, nothing.
Well, you're nut. When it's as big as mine, you can talk. All right, folks. So you have a whole weekend to check your premises. It's what active-minded, intelligent people do. So don't forget to do that little thing, will you? Check your premises. Peace.